Thank you, Sia. Oh, sorry, I should have asked about that. Let's start again. Let's call to order this regular meeting of the Livingston Urban Renewal Agency on February 27th, 2024, and we'll start with a roll call of board members present in person and on the phone. Lisa Garcia.
Rick Van Aken.
Allison Masenzi. And we had Kevin in the waiting room. I don't know if he dropped off or
He did. I'll let you know.
okay, if he comes back then. Just keep an eye out for that. Great. Okay, we'll start with approval of the minutes. Is there a board member present who would like to make a motion to approve both minutes?
I'll move approval of the November 14th, 2023 minutes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And is there a motion for November 28th?
I will motion to approve the minutes from November 28th, 2023.
And I'll second that.
Approval, all approval? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll consider those minutes approved. Next, we have the Lincoln School facade grants. Catherine can come up on behalf of Lincoln School Foundation.
Yes. Do I sign in or?
Sure.
Okay, good evening, URA board. My name is Catherine Bailey. I'm here representing the Lincoln School Foundation and our request for pre-approval for our climate control and historic rehabilitation project. To state my address for the record, I reside at 520 South 9th Street in Livingston. So how do you all usually do this? Do I like talk a little bit about the project and then we do questions?
Sometimes no one's here to represent,
Oh.
so we start with our discussion. If you want to give anything, I mean, we all have received the application. If you want to start off with anything, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we can just dive right in.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll give like just another brief overview. So the Lincoln School Foundation is looking into a suite of improvements to our 1914 historic school structure and the 1928 addition that included our gymnasium. And altogether, this suite of proposed improvements will drastically enhance the climate control for the structure, as well as restore the historic aesthetic of the beautiful 1914 Renaissance revival Tudor inspired design. This is important because the Lincoln School is not just a contributing building, but it is I can't remember exactly the term, like a primary building within the Livingston Historic Downtown District. And moreover, we think it will have many cascading benefits, not only on the block, but on the neighborhood and as well as on our local economy, because we do have nearly 30 tenants that include 6 local nonprofit organizations and 21 small businesses, nearly half of whom are working artists. So the suite of improvements includes one major interior improvement, and that's just the replacement of our failing, aging steam boiler, which fully failed in October of 2022. We got really bad timing because we hadn't used it over the summer, turned it back on, turns out it had a crazy leak and we didn't really have heat for the building. So we limped through the winter by funneling heat from the gymnasium into the rest of the building. To do that, we had to board up the original 1928 windows that are in the gymnasium, which makes it way less of a useful space for the children who use that room for wrestling. So not having any light, natural light or ventilation in that space is a problem, to say nothing of how it looks. We got a quote from Core Control at that time that put the replacement boiler at just under $183,000, which we did not have. The board has been diligently working to replenish their capital reserve. And so now we can commit nearly $80,000 to this whole project. But we also hope to reduce load on the boiler by doing a suite of improvements to the facade that will increase the thermal performance of the building while also restoring its historic aesthetic. You probably are all well aware that much of the glazing on all of like the three main faces of the structure has been replaced with glass block. That glass block is actually visible in the historic preservation documents that like depict the Lincoln School as like part of the historic district. So those have been in place for at least 45 years.
Oh.
And their age is really showing. They're broken in a lot of places. They're really discolored, and they also just are really diminishing, you know, how people read that structure as a Renaissance revival historic key component of our downtown district. Another key issue is our parapet caps. We took a closer look at those last week. And although the parapet cap on the western side of the building is doing okay, the ones on the east are in Lucas Shadd's language, who's on our board and is an architect, oatmeal. So they're actually so they really need some stabilization and restoration to prevent an active safety hazard to folks using the building grounds. Our paint is flaking off in a very visible manner. It dilutes the effect of the white trim, which emphasizes that stone course that differentiates the first and second stories. It's part of the Renaissance revival aesthetic. And of course, our three primary entryways just look terrible. They have a lot of glass block in them. Much of that's broken, and we have these very beat up metal doors also that are not period appropriate, that don't close particularly well. We've actually had recently issues of people getting into the building after hours. So it is a safety concern for our tenants. So these improvements are not just to restore the historic facade of the building and help the community see it as a historic building and contribute to the downtown district, but also really improve the quality of experience for our tenant. These improvements are expected to reduce our operating costs for heating by about $12,500 a year. That's how inefficient our system is. We had a engineer evaluate our current steam boiler at the time that it failed, or shortly after we got it limping along again, and they say that it's working at about 50% capacity right now. So it's really inefficient. The boiler that we've picked out will work with our existing radiators, most of our heating system, so we won't have to change those aspects of the historic interior. So we're trying to be very surgical in these interventions. The reason why we're approaching you as early as we are for these improvements is that there is an opportunity to use if the board determines that it's appropriate, and I completely understand if you don't think it's appropriate to approve this so far in advance of our proposed project start date of May of 2025, but there is an opportunity for us to leverage that approval in an application that we prepared that we'll be submitting to the State Department of Commerce as part of their biannual historic preservation grant cycle. They are the ones that kind of hold the keys to us being able to complete this very significant suite of work in a manner that conforms to the Secretary of Interior's standards for historic preservation. So that's like a requirement of their program, and that's a commitment that we have. And then also just find funding for a gigantic, really expensive boiler. It's just very difficult to raise $200,000 for a boiler. So that is why we're approaching you today, so early on in the process. I recognize that costs can change. So we've got an updated quote from Core Control for the boiler that was quoted back in October of 2022. And it is now, it increased from about $138,000 to $194,800. So that's why in our application, I stated we would be more than happy to and would expect to come back with hard bids closer to the anticipated date of construction. My understanding from the Department of Commerce related to this grant is that they'll have rankings available for all the grant applicants sometime in the fall. So we'll have a better idea at that point, whether we'll be able to leverage that funding source and do all of these improvements at once. I hope that covers it, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if not, I'd be happy to share a little tidbit about the history of the building that I learned recently.
Well, shoot, Luke.
Oh, yeah.
So, as you know, the Lincoln School, which was known as the Central School at the time of its construction during 1914 and 1915, opened shortly before the Spanish flu came to Montana. And during the Spanish flu, localities throughout Montana conscripted their local school buildings and actually teachers in the fight against the illness. So that was the case for the Central School, and the community decided that it would actually become a field hospital for people who had fallen ill. And a number of our local teachers volunteered to, instead of going home like their students did for 39 days, work under the supervision of 2 nurses to nurse ill community members during that period. This happened across the state. I think at least 40 teachers they have on record of having done this, but the Central School is, the Lincoln School today is a reminder of that period and the way that community buildings like the Central School or the Lincoln School can be repurposed as needed as in response to emerging community needs. So I thought that was a super cool story, and it was repurposed because it was this brand new building. It was built with every modern convenience, and yeah, it was a great space at the time that need arose.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, let's see. So I have a number of different questions. One is, so the Montana Historic Preservation Grant is due in 2 days.
That's correct.
So time is of the essence. Is that what you're telling us?
That's correct. So there are a lot of different, I don't know what the working parameters are for this body. So, you could choose to pre-approve it if that is the direction the board is heading in, with some sort of requirement that we return with XYZ materials at such and such date. You could, if you are not comfortable with this, you could say, we're not comfortable, and I would completely understand. There might be a third avenue in which I could forward you like a letter of support where you say, we support this project and we would like them to come back on this in this date, but like we expect them to be eligible or something XYZ. So again, I'm not trying to push the operating norms or boundaries of what the Urban Renewal Agency can and should be doing. And I just wanted to explore the possibility with you all.
I can answer that on behalf of the grant details. Basically, we can approve or pre-approve grants to entities that are starting a project within 18 months of Historical Preservation Committee
Yes.
approval, so that May date would fall under that. It also says, though, that the project completion needs to be within 18 months of approval from us.
Oh.
So that would like kind of enter into the stipulation that we would need another meeting, which is what we did for the Thompson building as an example, like because they've had to push back. We just said, we'd already pre-approved them. We pre-approved them again because it's been over a year and a half. With the stipulation that they have to come back within the next year and a half, even though the project won't be completed, but just to give us an update.
Yeah.
So just on like the basis of the timeline stuff, that's where the URA rules stand.
Great, that's helpful.
Mhm.
And to your point about the grant being due, it is completely prepared. The only thing remaining are just these little pieces to determine, where the URA stands and what our plan will be, if it seems like there is a path forward for some seeking URA funding in the future or that kind of stuff. So it's ready to go. We wanted to see if this was a piece we could include or if this is something we could say, to, the state, the URA can't provide any approvals at this time, and they've encouraged us to come back at this later date.
Do we, Allison, sorry, Catherine, I don't have any questions for you
Yeah.
specifically, because this is such a detailed application. I appreciate that. My questions are for us, really. Do we have an estimate for 2025? Yeah? Like an estimated budget that we would,
Well, the only project on board we don't for 2025 yet, but the major project would be the Thompson Building, which is at the max
for 100,000 as well.
for 100,000. Previous years, we've had $350,000 for facade grants and the rest going to the capital projects. So I imagine it could be similar with the rest, instead of going to the capital projects, going towards the housing rehabilitation program. And we have a budget higher than when this was written, so I think we'll still have, I would assume we'll have at least $300,000 available. And I don't know of any other $100,000 requests on the agenda or in the near future.
And then I know we have the update for the rehabilitation program later on today, but are we anticipating anything for that for 2025?
I don't know that far out yet for that. So I think ideally we keep a separate budget for the two programs so that we can plan this far in advance, because it seems so far with the housing rehabilitation program being so new, we aren't able to estimate that far out, but we do have good data on the facade grant requests and how long things typically take, especially when they're this size project, so. Yeah. Does that answer everything enough?
Yeah. And then my other question just for us internally is, so Catherine has a breakdown of where she sees URA dollars going, and some of it's to the storm windows. And does that fall outside of our purview because it's related to heating?
I
think
believe,
we could change it.
well, this part, the window storm sashes, that'll be visible. It's part of the window, so it's visible from the outside as well.
Yeah,
so
it
that-
goes,
Yeah.
it's an application on top of the original single pane 1814 windows. And that's actually recommended by the Secretary of Interior's standards for the preservation of historic buildings.
Oh,
is-
okay,
So you can keep your original window and you do like a matching pane configuration on top.
Nice.
So it looks pretty much the same. We've done that with 26 of our windows on the building already, so.
Okay,
Nice.
so that's a facade thing.
Yep.
That's-
Yep.
But I'm happy to reappropriate that for an entryway or entryways if you'd prefer.
Oh, no, I was just thinking if we couldn't do that, then the entryway would be like an even swap, and I think that would be a facade, but
Yeah.
the windows are fine.
Yeah, I can comment on my thoughts on the breakdown. You as an entity can decide however you would want to spend the money. What we can give is up to half the project costs that relate to the URA.
Yeah.
So if it's helpful for you to look at it this way, the way it currently stands, it's over $200,000 of URA related expenses. So that 100,000 that we would be able to give as a max would fall within that. So it wouldn't change. But if say this, I doubt it will happen, but if it went down by, 50% and all the URA related things, the windows, entryways, which aren't currently listed for URA, but could be, like, if all those fell under $200,000, we would only be able to give up to half.
Yeah.
And so
definitely.
that's what I wanted to communicate. I think you already knew that, but, so this breakdown is definitely helpful for you to figure out how things are getting funded, but for us, we will just, when we double check everything, we would double check like what exactly went to the URA. And if any of these did go down, but another area went up and that fell under the URA facade program, then we could adjust accordingly.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or discussion?
I really, I tell you, I really don't have any questions. I can comment that, when I saw the little the picture of the children in front of the school. Am I in that picture?
Oh, need a bigger.
Because,
Yeah.
because, I went through middle school there. I was in the late fifties, early sixties, late fifties, I guess. So, I'm familiar with the school and have been dismayed that, that it did feel like it was deteriorating for sure. So, I'm supportive of being able to do this if we can. My biggest question to my chair was, now are they going about this right? You know, because you're having to get a pre-approval to get it in the, to try to get it in the historic preservation grant. So that can come back later and then you can have this as a, to help fill in the gap. So, am I on track there that makes sense how that would work? So,
Yep.
I'd make a motion that we go ahead and approve. If I'm less, unless I'm corrected that, we can't do that just yet.
Well. I don't know if I wait for a second or if I just say
But we can't approve it.
yeah, yeah. So we have a motion to approve for the requested maximum amount.
Mhm.
Do we have a second?
We have a second with a request to get updated when you guys are able to in fall.
Yeah.
2024, correct?
Great, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we'd be happy to. Mhm.
Great. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
You got your hands full, Catherine.
Yes. Is
Thank
there?
you.
I don't think
No.
so.
Alright.
Were you saying something about this item?
This person's not on the board, right?
No.
Okay, that's,
And my other thought was also about the letter of support, if that would help you to get that from the URA, we would definitely do that as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be
If it would just
fantastic.
be like an extra benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just because the meeting minutes won't be out by
Mhm.
Thursday, I think including that would be really helpful, and then we can say the meeting minutes will come out and show that, yeah. Should I send that to URA or should I send that to you directly?
You could send it to URA and that should come to me. Sometimes there's issues, so you could follow up with me directly or CC me and just make sure I get it.
Okay, that would be so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
And-
you for all your preparation.
Yeah, for sure. And we're
Yeah.
we're thinking that maybe we'll do like a storytelling night at the Livingston or the Lincoln School for people who attended. So
Mhm.
think of your silliest, most fun moments as a student, if you want to share it.
Yeah. Now you're asking me to remember.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anyway.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Catherine.
Next on agenda item 3, we have the Earth Cam discussion. Okay.
Frank Anthony, City of Livingston. I'll be really quick because I know we need to hear from the downtown master plan people. Just to give you a little background on what EarthCam is. EarthCam is a network of webcams across the world that people, tune into, and it's used for tourism, education, among other things. I have experience with it because when I was a teacher, I used to put it on in my classroom while I was teaching. It's kind of a way to like show students different parts of the world. We're not really asking for official action from the URA today. But from the city, we were wondering if this is something you would like for us to investigate for potentially putting, on our main street where there would be a webcam. And if you would be interested in funding it, I can actually do like a fleshed out presentation and kind of give you specifics around the cost. But really, we were just wanting to know if that's something that would interest you.
I've never heard of this before, so I probably will have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Or maybe just, yeah, but my main one would be is, do you have a relation of the increase of the taxable value of the district due to these earth cams and?
No, I don't, but I can research that. So primarily, it's a network, you would go under Montana, Livingston would pop up and it would create like a live webcam shot down Main Street, for instance. But it's really, it's used for tourism and education, but really what we wanted to figure out, we've been looking for a potential funding source for this project. And if it's something that you guys are interested in, I will create a presentation, kind of fully flesh it out along with costs. But we just want to know if that's a direction that you guys are comfortable with.
Do you have an estimate of how much money it will cost?
I believe right around $3,000 total.
3,000 total,
Yeah.
or 3,000 annually?
No, 3,000 total. I think it's $100 annually after you install it. So
Hmm.
those are ballpark. I would have official numbers.
I certainly would have a lot of questions and just curious about like how it's been used elsewhere to
Yeah.
drive tourism and like activity in urban renewal.
Absolutely.
But if you're willing to. present
Yeah,
it,
if you,
Great.
I will absolutely do that. So I'll have that put on the next meeting.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, looking forward. Thank you, Greg.
I'm
Thanks.
so curious what that one.
Yeah.
Just look up EarthCam and.
I'm sorry, and your name again? Your
Greg
name?
Anthony.
What was,
Greg Anthony.
oh, Greg.
Yes.
Okay. Let me get this written down.
Okay. Thank you. Next, great job. Next up, we have the downtown master plan update. Andy back.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again. I'm actually gonna mostly turn the show over to Matt Prosser, who's joining us over Zoom. But Andy Rutz with Crescendo Planning and Design had a kind of work session with you all back in fall, and just wanted to take the opportunity while we were touching base on some of the other downtown master plan items to have Matt reach back out and kind of keep the conversation moving forward about a URA strategy that'll segue in with the rest of the plan recommendations. So I'm gonna take some notes. I'm happy to answer questions in person, but I'll turn it over to Matt for slides.
Does he need to present? Okay, I just gave him.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt.
Hello, hi everyone. I'll see if I can share my screen here. All right. Y'all see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to be with you all, at least virtually today. So based on our conversation we had in November, we've put together sort of a initial sort of framework of a strategy, and really wanted to use some of our time tonight just to vet what we have documented so far and see if we're heading in the right direction, and then talk about some additional analysis we're going to do to support the effort. So as a reminder, in our discussion we had in November, we discussed sort of our vision for downtown, most needed improvements, and then thinking about roles and programs that you all might want to take on. So in terms of vision, some of the things we heard were ideas around local business and local ownership, driving more people downtown, whether that's living, working, or visiting, having downtown be an inviting place to be and a well-connected place. We had a lot of discussion around sort of that one big thing or the most needed improvements. And so really this ethos of using underutilized spaces and buildings really came through. Obviously, parking is always the top of mind for a lot of folks. And then the idea of providing a place or places that people can gather that aren't necessarily a bar or restaurant, which is kind of largely the only places to gather currently in downtown. So kind of reflecting back to you some of the comments you all made. We also discussed potential programs and roles, and so we tried to summarize some of these responses that you all gave us into different buckets. So when we're thinking about projects, there was discussion about providing parking, wayfinding and signage, pocket parks or plazas, that sort of places to gather kind of thing. more programmatically around housing developments, business attraction, potentially property acquisition, and then again, sort of reusing or rehabilitating existing buildings. And then some other comments were around how can we communicate out sort of the benefits of TIF and how to actually gain some more interest in some of the programs, as well as how do we leverage the TIF and secure other funding sources so we can make those dollars go further. So based on that feedback, we developed sort of an initial strategy framework here on this slide. And so I'll just sort of walk you through it, and then I just kind of want to have a discussion about what your thoughts are and any reactions. So, thinking about objectives, at least stating clearly what we're trying to achieve with the use of these public funds and the powers of the URA is supporting reinvestment in existing buildings and places, attracting more people to downtown, providing places for people to gather, and supporting sort of the functionality of downtown, whether that's wayfinding or parking management. They came out as sort of the objectives, at least that we heard from you all. Some considerations to think about is how you allocate the TIF funding that you have. Do you dedicate or limit a portion of that to certain programs? You kind of already do that for your existing programs. And then is there a target goal for how you want to spend your TIF? I understand right now you're sort of building momentum for existing programs and trying to get a sense of, with the new residential program, how much you'll actually need or want to spend annually. But do we want to start to specify some limits or some targets for what you all are allocating in terms of funding on an annual basis? So as you know, you have two sort of main programs: the facade repair and renovation grants, and the new residential rehabilitation grant program. So we think those are great programs to continue, and I think they get at sort of those objectives that you guys have clearly stated. So it makes sense to continue with those. And so we've identified some potential other ones to consider, and I'd like to kind of help refine this list down tonight with your input. And so we heard some desire to support some specific capital improvement projects within downtown. Signage was one, some road crossing, potentially another one. Supporting the investment in like a plaza or a park, something for places or a place for people to gather. One thing that we've heard a lot of interest in from you all, but also from others, is how do we utilize the upper stories of our older historic buildings in downtown, and really sort of what the master plan strategy is sort of headed towards for those is kind of an all of the above strategy. I know there's been a lot of discussion, desire about those upper floors only being used for residential. Some folks want them to be used only for short-term rentals. Others want them to be office. And I think our general thought is we need to try to drive as much activity and vibrancy in downtown as we can. And using those spaces for whatever uses are most viable, I think is a sound strategy, especially because a portion of those buildings would be very difficult to make them into really functional long-term rentals or condo spaces. And so being a little more flexible. So one consideration of the strategy would be the consideration of either expanding your residential rehabilitation grant program to allow for things like short-term rentals or even office space as part of it, or creating a new program that's focused specifically on those upper stories of those older buildings in the core of downtown. Another potential consideration is large project gap funding or financing. That obviously would come somewhat on an ad hoc basis. I mean, I think our recommendation would be that the increment that's generated by those projects would be the amount or a portion of the amount that would be able to be invested in that project. And so it's really sort of, a project specific funding tool if a large, say, apartment building or other housing development were happen to be proposed in downtown. And so wanting to sort of get input on whether or not you think that's something you all want to support if it were to come. We are developing plans and ideas for potential housing developments that could occur in different portions of the study area on some of our opportunity sites. And so we want to get kind of confirmation that's something that this board is interested in supporting using the TIF funding. Another thing that we heard from you all was potentially being a strategic in land acquisition, whether that's securing land for a public use or parking, or supporting development and making sure that a potential opportunity site is secured and we can use it for the type of development you'd like to see, whether that's housing in general or affordable housing or what have you. And then lastly, I think an interesting idea that I think would play well with sort of the passion of this board is perhaps trying to identify an annual project that you sort of champion yourselves. And you kind of use your capacity that you have, obviously in a volunteer basis, in conjunction with the city to sort of do a pet project annually, and using some of your TIF funding to help support that project, whether it is identifying a place for a plaza or a small park in downtown, or trying to get a specific parcel developed for housing or other beautification efforts, perhaps in conjunction with the bid. And so wondering some thoughts or input on the idea of doing a pet project and what you think might be a good first one out the gate for this group. So with that, I'll pause here, and I want to open it up to discussion about all of these topics. I think some questions to prompt you are, do these objectives make sense? Do we need to refine those at all, or do you like that direction? And then what are your thoughts on sort of potential programs that this group might be able to take on over the coming years? And not necessarily saying that this is something you should do day one, but how, what are some additional programs you might want to explore, and then how do we tie those potentially to the master plan? So yeah. Not everybody at once.
I had a thought of like, was there any slide that covers the downtown master plan feedback in general you've been hearing from the public? I know we talked about it at our last meeting, and then some of us have done focus groups and got an update, but
Yeah, I
just
think
communication, I guess you're saying all of these align with what you're hearing the public wants.
yeah, I think I can start, and then Andy, I'll let you sort of reinforce. Yeah, and very much so the potential programs align with what we've been hearing. And so one of the big things we've heard is obviously the use of and reuse of existing buildings and spaces, especially those second and third stories. And so how we might be able to expand programs to support many things in those. There is a consistent desire for some sort of place to gather, and what that looks like, I think is still a little in definition, but how can we create some more public spaces that are usable? And that falls within sort of that idea of a capital funding project. We have heard desire for additional housing in downtown. I think that is a great strategy for trying to maintain and increase vitality. And so we're still doing some studies around what's feasible and what some of the gaps are around different housing product types in different locations and defining that more. But we know there's likely going to be some financial gaps that the URA could help address. And so wanting to sort of gauge the interest there too. And then there are just some opportunity sites that have been identified, whether it's for parking or potentially for housing, that perhaps the TIF can participate in making sure that the desired project that goes there happens. So Andy, you want to give a sort of a broader overview or more detail to some of the things you've been hearing the last couple of days?
Sure. I think that's a pretty good recap, Matt. I think the one theme and the kind of intentionality in the potential programs is really to kind of allow the board to decide whether the board is interested in taking like a proactive role in helping to implement some of the recommendations that come out of the master plan, or like a more reactive role, right? Where it's, you're gonna get applicant-based requests, or some of these ideas and potential programs, like a priority project or land acquisition, are steps to say like, hey, we have the resources to help kind of be catalytic in this effort. I think Matt recapped the kind of the flavor of desires that we've got from the community. I will say that, you know, some of them are really like bold, long-term ideas about like new streetscape with trail infrastructure that can take you from the core downtown down to the park. And that's one of those ones where it, you know, the funding stream might take us a while to get there, but there are like short-term improvements we could start to put in place to like gain the community's like comfort and understanding and moving through those spaces. And again, I think that's illustrative of like the URA's role could be helping to implement the short term. Or it could be, hey, let's like try to encourage a more grassroots, maybe city-led effort in the short term, and we'll be there to help like finance the bigger lift when the time comes. I do think at Matt's prompt on the objectives, and I think that is an important one, is being really clear in communicating that to, you know, the residents in Livingston, that this is the board's kind of charge, and this is how we want to interface with like the community largely, but then also the downtown master plan, like specifically, I think is hoping to align its recommendations really strategically with the board's objectives, knowing that you can bring a lot of resources to the table. Yeah, I'll take notes and.
Would you mind if I wanted to clarify one thing about, just to remind everybody that the planning area for the downtown master plan actually is pretty much the same as the URA boundary, and we did that on purpose. It incorporates the historic district, it incorporates the CBD, but the URA boundary is broader.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I just want to make sure everybody remembered.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I would be curious to hear other sources of funding for these projects, like a pocket park. Is it something where the URA say we decided as a group we wanted to, and this is just as one example, but we wanted to do something like that, or help that? Are you seeing other sources of funding? And then also like, so then URA's percentage would just be kept to a certain percent of the total project cost for things, any one of these, I guess, like trails, pocket parks, things that are sort of public use, not a building, you know, identified as a better opportunity than development of that space, for example.
I think that's, yeah, I think that'd be great direction to us from you all, is that we are interested in funding some of these projects, but we don't want to be the sole funder. We want to be a partner. And then sort of, you know, how much do you want to be a partner of it? And I think that's a pretty great way to use your resources, is, you know, we will be somebody to help you get over the finish line with this, but go find other grant funding that you can leverage our dollars with, similar to what you're doing with the historic preservation request that you just heard. So that's something we can include. So yes, we're interested in capital projects, but we don't want to be the sole funder. We want to be a partner, and we want you to show us how you're leveraging our dollars to make the project go further. So that would be my recommendation.
I think I have like a similar sentiment to Allison too, because one, I love the objectives, and I also love the idea to start allocating our budget by the percentage of each program, because one of the difficulties I have is like when someone like Catherine comes up with a great proposal, I'm like, oh my goodness, 2025 is so far away. We don't know what we're gonna do. It would be great if we had some sort of allocation. So I love that idea. And then when it comes to the other potential programs, similarly, my question is like, what can only the URA do, right? Versus like where people can source other funding from, because then I think that makes it easier for her to like prioritize the potential programs, like where is it only URA could do.
Right.
But I love the idea of also being proactive versus reactive. Like I think our existing programs, it takes a little bit to see the results, right? People have to come to us with an application, we approve it, maybe 6 to 18 months later. You know, there's a better looking building somewhere. But I do love the idea of doing something that is proactive and that we can see right away an improvement to downtown, whether that be like a gathering spot or
Mhm.
what Andy mentioned about like helping with some of those shorter term.
Kind of pilot project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think to that point, Andy, we haven't really talked about this, but I think one thing that we can do as we start to identify those specific projects within sort of the implementation strategy is to identify the ones where we think TIF might be a good use and sort of what portion of that cost we could, you know, see or want the TIF to allocate or to be a part of the amount. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words. So to give you a better sense, as we're sort of vetting those strategies with you all and the larger community of, you know, how much money we'd be asking through the master plan, and if you're comfortable with that, generally, we don't have to necessarily put specifics into the implementation plan, but to give you a better idea of where we potentially could see, you know, what specific projects we could see the use of TIF funds on.
And I would say too, the way we can provide that direction better is if, and you don't have to have this answer tonight, but if the URA board can like come to a consensus on these are the types of programs or efforts that like are priorities to us, these are the ones we're really passionate about, then it'll be easier for us to flag, like, here are the types of specific projects that would fit in that kind of charge that you want to pursue. So, and that's, if I were to give the board some advice, I think it would be resist the temptation to like be all things to everyone.
Mhm.
Figure out like the kind of things that you really feel convicted about, the kind of places where you can fill a gap or a need within the community. Like put your head down and chase that with a fervor for the next 3 to 5 years. Once you knock all those off the list, like move on to the things that like just missed the cut.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, in my experience, sometimes it gets daunting, right? To say like, we've got money we can put towards this, and we've got partnerships that we can help pair, but everyone's asking. And so we want to like touch all those bases, and sometimes the collective impact is diminished by like smaller, kind of spread out investments.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. I guess that's why I was starting with like, I don't even know how much it would cost to do a pocket park, and then I don't foresee the URA handling maintenance of such.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like it would be sort of, get people over the finish line. Yeah, I'm sort of. Here we go. I agree. I like the idea of percent allocations. I really think we will continue doing the facade grants, and we should be able to pull data from, say, the last 5 years and say how much was actually going to the facade grants.
Are we trending down like?
I think we're trending back up, but there were years, maybe right before you joined, where we had very minimal grant applications even. And so then we would do other pet projects, and then that brings it to the next thing, things like pet projects. I think it would be interesting if we could help projects cross the finish line, but keep it at a very small percentage per project, like total per budget. I don't. And it would have to be with a great deal of, open community discussion. People in the TIF think that is worthy of funding, or have the opportunity at least to discuss, if not. So. Did you have specific thoughts on being proactive, like in which areas?
Oh, I mean, anything, I think that could be low hanging fruit to me. I don't know what that would be based on your guys' recommendations, but, I think it would be nice within like the next couple of years to be able to see something that we helped fund, but that to me can also be like capital projects or things that we contribute to, but don't necessarily own. I guess what I meant by proactive versus reactive is like, I'd rather not just add like another application grant program that takes
Yes.
2 years for us to see
Right.
any results from, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting that sort of, as we sort of flesh the master plan out, perhaps finding an effort or two within the implementation that you all are passionate about. So
Right.
I think we can continue to flag opportunities as they're more defined. And I know it's a little bit hard because we're still fairly high level, but that's good direction to us. You know, let's earmark things that we think might make sense for you all and then come back to you and see what you think.
That'd be great. And I wanted to clarify that if there were a development within, you mentioned housing within the district, that the current program would be able to hear applications for that. It doesn't have to be a second floor.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can be new development. So if that comes along and we want to siphon that into that existing program, let us know that as well.
And one thing I foresee with that potentially is if a larger development comes in, the structure of how you want to allocate your TIF and the development agreement that you would do with them might differ from what is laid out in the residential rehab program specifications. And so just sort of a note that that might happen. You might want to structure it differently because those larger projects might have some different sort of parameters than perhaps was envisioned with the program originally. So it's not to say that you're not open to it, but it might end up being sort of a one-off opportunity, and just confirming that you all are open to that sort of idea.
Sorry, what do you mean by one-off?
Well, so I'd say like a larger housing project wants to build in the study area. But their TIF request is a little bit different than the parameters that are laid out in your residential program. It's probably, you might want to do a separate sort of agreement that's outside of that program for a request for TIF for that project support to support it. And so just I'm just kind of confirming that you guys would be open to sort of that sort of supporting a project like that or not, or if you'd like to keep it in the confines of what's laid out in the grant program currently.
This was, yeah, we did leave the program intentionally a little bit vague just to be able to hear out some requests from new development.
Yeah.
That's why it was more on a per unit basis and could be partially funding projects. So if someone were creating 10 units and 5 of them were short-term or hotel rentals, what about the other 5? And that's
Right.
where we are open to mixed use projects, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we could, well, this is for us internally, but I think we could also, if the residential rehabilitation specifically doesn't get a lot of applicants, we can always go back and change the guidelines to be more inclusive of bigger projects, right? So we wouldn't necessarily create like a separate grant program for the other rehabilitation applicants. We could just rework the guidelines. I think it'd be too people, right? If we have like residential and then separate upper floor
Right,
program, that seems cumbersome.
right. Yep.
Great. That's good direction.
Yeah, I guess the only one I'll just ask for feedback on one more time real quickly is the objectives, the 4 objectives, are they? And again, you can take more time to like really wordsmith and think about them, but do you feel like those are on the right track? Are there things that you feel like are glaringly missing from those? And the reason I asked, right, so like support wayfinding and parking management. If that's not an objective, that takes like some of the potential programs off the table,
Yes.
right?
I could speak for myself in saying, I could see how signage could be helpful for safety. I don't think parking and wayfinding is the highest priority of the URA in terms of removing blight.
Yeah.
Facade
No.
application is obviously the most obvious of removing blight, but there are a lot of other things that go into that, like underutilized alleyways, underutilized properties. And that I think would be an easier like to filter out potential projects with that in mind. It still is very broad in terms of what blight and safety can cover.
Right.
Those are my thoughts. It's more about, we're trying to be proactive. I think a lot of us have stated that we're trying to create something that wouldn't exist otherwise, that fits the future vision and growth plan of the city and its citizens, not necessarily, no one wants to pay for parking, so make the URA do it.
Right. It's less about management of downtown and more sort of the catalyzing activity in it. So yeah, that's great feedback. And under that, I think taking out that last bullet point makes a lot of sense.
Wayfinding to me also fits within attract more people to downtown, so I am a huge fan of wayfinding, but I think it can be rolled up into, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
People there.
I have one slide of next steps that we were considering, so I'd love just a little bit of feedback on that as well. So we've heard you a desire for some understanding of what individual project costs are and how much the TIF could or would or should contribute to those. So that's stuff we can bring back that's tied to specific improvements that are identified in the plan. We're going to do some housing development feasibility analysis for a few different product types that potentially the community might want to see in downtown. And so in that feasibility testing, we'll understand what potential gaps might be and, where and how TIF revenue or funding could be used to support those housing projects. And then do some additional research into how to attract other funds and leverage your dollars further. More specifically, I think tied to those projects that are going to go into the plan. So some of the conversation we had are things that we're planning to do. Are there one other element that I didn't list here, I think makes a lot of sense, is doing a little bit of just forecasting of funding and some allocation scenarios for you all to look at as well.
I was gonna ask that too, from an economic perspective, because we are based on taxable value of the district. With other changes happening in this downtown master plan, looking out ahead, what is the value of the district expected to be? So that we can understand if there's massive changes coming, like how much our budget will increase in 10 years, because that would change the strategy of land acquisition and buying all that. So that would be super helpful, any like projections on the overall value, and then that can help the URA understand their reach. And then what was I just gonna say? Oh, and it might be going backwards, but I think the reason we went in the direction of housing in our district is not saying it's the only thing the URA will do. It's saying that is identified as a public need. I would have a hard time arguing for interior projects that are commercial in downtown, in our district, I would say. Like if someone were creating a beautiful office space for themselves, or even a venue space, I have that's for rent. I have a hard time sort of, I don't think the URA has enough money in their budget to handle those types of requests.
Okay.
Maybe in like that, there's a small pet project fund, and it's, to get them over the finish line or to make it a little bit better, and it might affect outside things could be considered. But as a general rule, I don't know if that's helping with public needs, public safety, or removing of blight.
Yeah, no, that's great direction here too. So yeah, I think it's important to clearly state sort of your objectives and be intentional, to Andy's point about that, in terms of what you're really trying to achieve. And so that's awesome feedback.
Does anyone have a comment on that, though? I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone. That came from me first.
I agree. I think all of our projects in the end should benefit the community or the public in some way. So your example of like someone's private office, I also would be reluctant to approve something like that.
Mhm.
Without the person being able to show how that would also be an asset to the community at large.
Yes.
Right.
We're
Or
accepting
addressing,
update portion of the office development that we would consider, I would say.
yeah. Or if there's some major blight for some reason it's addressing, but yeah,
Yeah. So it seems like these unicorn projects are these, like, we don't know exactly, you're starting to identify the spaces that might be able, URA may be able to help by, you know, again, big picture, acquiring that space so that it isn't developed into something that the community does not want, right? Because that's what's part of the original plan.
Yep.
Or if it's meant to be more greenery, like, I think these all could fall under the purview of what we're interested in. And we just need to keep communicating.
great. Yeah.
And is there any other next steps for us to, on the funding? Like in terms of percentage of TIF for, like you're saying, there's some scenarios, we help, is there any other information we can give?
Yeah, I can connect with you directly to get whatever historic information we might need to do projections, and then we'll plan on trying to circle back with you in the near future with some more definition and some of those scenarios for you all to react to. And we'll work with Jen and others and Grant to figure out the best venue and way to do that with you all.
Sounds great.
Allison, if you do wind up pulling like historical facade grant data,
Yes.
could you just send it to all of us?
Yes, I put that on a list for my, or action item for myself is to have, just budget history. So,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
all for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Yep, we'll chat soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Yes. Andy, anything else on that agenda item, or
No, that
thank you
was
so
really-
much.
Really helpful.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Moving on to 4B, residential rehabilitation grant program update. So
I talked to Grant before I came here because he's definitely more informed on what's going on than I am with the grant program, but I haven't been involved. We both have met with a couple of different potential applicants for that grant program, discussing their projects with them, what's allowed by zoning, what they want to do. But still kind of haven't solidified anything yet. We don't have any hard conversations, I guess, yet, like firm. So I think the word keeps getting out, and I think more people are just trying to kind of figure out what information they need, and it's a lot of information sharing right now. But I think some of those are probably going to move forward. Don't know when, but and some of the ones that are not as extensive and complex, I think that you could see them in 6 months if they go forward.
Do you think there's anything else we should, like, we obviously had our open house, we've been in the enterprise. Do you guys think there's anything else that we can do?
I think as a reminder, if you want to, like I said, I think quite a few people know about it. And some people still have questions, but you know, I haven't run this by Grant, but I think he'd probably be pretty on board with it. We are starting to put together informational handouts, I guess, if you will, for certain things like the PUD ordinance that just passed and affordable housing. And I think this could be one, just kind of the URA. What does it do?
Mhm.
What, you know, are the public benefits and what types of funding programs are out there? We could, if you're interested, potentially put together like a handout. They're all kind of, for you guys, it's a front and a back, it's letter size, and they're all gonna be kind of formatted similarly. So these are things that people can, the idea is one day And this is sort of from a previous planning position I had somewhere else where we had sort of a wall of handouts. Of course, they would be available online too, and links, but, of different things, zoning things, the frequently asked questions, or, urban renewal grant funding, or, just whatever, types of things that are going on. When we have the zoning code update, we might put something out like that. The downtown master plan, we might do something like that. So if that's something that you think would get the word out more, and I think it couldn't hurt, we could look at kind of putting some things together and putting that as one of our handouts. And maybe just ask Grant, he does newsletters, I think, every 2 weeks. They might be monthly, I could be wrong. But maybe just in a month or two from now, if you haven't seen more an applicant come through or something, and you want to maybe just remind people, or maybe there's some new developers kind of looking to come to Livingston and interested in projects, I think then that kind of gets the word out as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So
Sure.
I think it takes people a good bit of time to kind of figure out how their projects, what information they would need, what projects they have, would it qualify for your grant program before they're gonna come in. So it's just, since it's such a new program, but I know Grant's talked to quite a few people. We've met with, like I said, a couple of potential developers or applicants for those developments. So, it's moving. You just haven't seen it yet.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay.
Okay, we will now open up to public comments. Can we set a timer? Oh, great, yes, we just have the process is to come up here, sign in, with your name and address, or just state your name and address for the record, and we try and keep it to, 2 minutes. Per comment.
Well, yeah, someone will.
Yeah, we'll set one on our end, yeah. Well, then I guess they can't see.
Or
Jen, do you mind doing a 2-minute timer, please? Or we'll do 3 minutes. 'cause you
Okay,
don't
we
have
can
to-
do it on my phone.
Yes,
Right,
and fine,
phone.
go ahead and
We're gonna
sign
do
in
3
and then
minutes?
state your name and address for the. So our recording device can gather it for the minutes.
Jump up and do jumping jacks when time's up, or just like sing song.
Thank you, Andy.
Am I good?
Thanks, Sandy.
Good.
You're good.
My name is Mary Bentley and I reside at One View Vista Drive, trailer number 60. I am part of the community, we own our own community. We're in the process of the View Vista. We have been annexed into the city. We are looking at, we have some great housing, but we need some help getting it developed. We have a 33 apartment complex right now that is deteriorated. It's an old trailer park motel, about 100 years old. We are in the process, we're having brand new infrastructures done, water, sewer project that the city's helping us underwrite. We're trying to figure out what is out there to help us with what we could do to develop some new housing down there. We have been under the impression that they are looking at rezoning us to, I think it's mixed use, to where they told us we could build 4 high, but there again, it's gonna be funds. But we could probably do a very nice job of taking care of some of Livingston's housing problems. And we are in the area, we are right across the street from the high school. So we are right in the downtown area. And so we are just looking for information to see where our qualifications would need to be and what we could do for getting us some help in doing some new housing.
Okay. Yes. I know you emailed us, right? You emailed me before.
Yes, I
Okay.
did, yes. I
And so
did.
we obviously double checked that you're in the district, so that's great. The way the program stands, did you have any specific questions about the the guidelines online?
We just haven't even started any of the process. We are just trying to figure out if we are even within the rights of the district to be part of this. Or, you know, to look for other funding and stuff too. So that's kind of where we are. We've only had the purchase of this property for the last 4 years. I am the vice president of the board of directors down there.
Okay,
Well, you are within the district, grant.
Yes.
I've started, so you are within.
Okay, and we will be having our annual monthly board meeting on Thursdays, so I'm just ready to start taking some information in and get it back.
okay. And are any of these units currently on the market?
There, we have 3 that were up for rent. We're working on some repairs, otherwise we're full.
Full,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, our housing is always full.
Okay.
But they're so old, they're, a lot of it's old motel. So if you can imagine, they took motel rooms and redid them.
Right.
mhm,
But thank you for your time.
thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
I guess what I will say is definitely familiarize yourself with the document if you are interested in applying, and if you have any specific questions. I think where we run into an issue potentially is that it's meant for vacant or unused housing units or undeveloped.
Okay,
So create basically net new units being brought to market. So if you already have units that are being rented, I don't believe that they will fall under this particular program as it stands. This is a pilot program, and so, you know, over the next few months, we're going to continue hearing applications and have meetings like Jen was saying, you know, we're still in the informational phase. And so we may be changing the guidelines or the program itself in the next few months. So I definitely think we should all keep in touch since you are in the early stages. But as it stands, the program is meant to incentivize people to bring new units to market that are not currently available.
okay. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for your
Yeah,
time.
but keep in touch.
Oh, thank you.
District Grade 0204 East Calendar Street. Think I've done this before.
Yeah,
I just wanted to give you this kind of fun. It's really just something you can frame and put up, but it shows so many of the Yellowstone. My family's history is the building of these hotels in downtown Livingston, and the Yellowstone hotels were built at the same time the Livingston hotels were built. So in 1903, the Depot Center was built, the Murray was built, and Old Faithful Inn was built. I mean, they were all built, and they shared equipment, they shared building materials. And the families were very close to each other. My father was named Harry Grable after Harry Child's Faithful Inn. So this is fascinating heritage that we have of 20 hotels in downtown Livingston. It is easiest to convert those empty second story spaces, of course, to hotel rooms because they were hotels. So when my family found, I ran affordable housing for 20 years. And I will never do it again. I mean, I've just really got tired of people throwing beer down the stairs and everything else that we dealt with. And once we became at least a significant part of our building a hotel, then suddenly pride in this beautiful space, it became more and more beautiful because it wasn't being abused. It also was much more lucrative. So to me, the future of Livingston is in, and I don't call them, I call them hotel groups. I don't use any use by other organizations that all of them short-term rentals or anything else. Those are hotel rooms, and those were hotels. So our board for the Downtown Building Owner Business Association has reconstituted itself. And we have about 13 board members, several of whom are investors in downtown Livingston. For example, the man who built the grain elevator, Chris Osinski, is on our board. And what we are doing is working towards identifying those places that could potentially become partial hotel spaces again. And it's kind of fun to look at these because there was a period in which Livingston did not cherish these amazing buildings. And we lost the Albemarle, we lost the Opera House, and they're so gorgeous, and we lost the Grand Hotel.
Mhm.
And even last year, we lost the, we lost the bank building. So the other thing our board is really looking for is cherishing these structures in down these 20 hotels per
Mhm.
se. So we're celebrating it. We're letting people know what's happening. Our board has reconstituted. We'll have a website. We have membership, but I wanted to let you know that because it's easy. I've been there. It's easy to convert them to a hotel. And the Marine has 15 of their spaces are hotel. That's all. It isn't the whole Marine. It's always mixed use, office space, rental, hotel. And that is the most successful use of the second story. And it is one that will be financially feasible
Mhm.
and we've been there and done that. Got the t-shirt. So I just don't think economically, I don't think we're ever going to be able to go back to affordable housing in these second stories. The Grable has 2 affordable units out of all of our units. It's just, I think should be moving to being the most fascinating entry to Yellowstone that it's always been, and so beautiful.
Mhm.
Because once these get fixed up, they're gorgeous. You're welcome to the Grable, but we'd like to take you on a trip later this summer
Fun.
with our yellow bus. So
Thank you. I wondered
Sure.
also if you would invite myself or another one of our board members to come to the downtown building and business owners meeting next time you have a meeting or anytime in the future. And then we could hear feedback from as many people that show up and just absorb and learn.
we have about 13 board members and they're pretty like Chris Osinski, they're more builders and investors.
Can you repeat the name of the board again?
It's called the Livingston Downtown Building Owner and Business Association. And we are the oldest downtown organization in Livingston. We started the Livingston Business Improvement District and the T-BID and the CBB, and we got all of it going. We've been at this for 16 years.
Yes, I think it'd be great for us to be in.
We'd love
In
to have you
contact.
at our meeting.
Yeah.
And one other quick thing, I transcribed our meeting with our city manager. And that was so informative, so if you want
Oh,
a
yeah.
transcription, I'll send it to
please.
you and you can get it. to
That would be
your board
great.
member.
Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have any other public comment? Hello.
Justin Goujon, 618 East Geyser.
I'm not gonna time this because that was like 10 minutes.
I just wanted to say, comment on the, getting the word out about the grant programs. The simple solution could just be some very simple branding where you guys have a window sticker that goes on a project that says this project was partially funded by the URA. More information, go to this website. Could be a banner for a bigger construction project, just something that gets the logo out there and gets people familiar. And then I thought there was an interesting opportunity to talk about the gap loan funding for larger development projects in the downtown area. And I don't know what the restrictions are on the grant money for the URA, but maybe you look at this as an opportunity to make a investment in a project that you get a return on over years and thereby refill the coffers of the URA, so that money could be recycled again and again over a decade. Just something I think is worth exploring.
I noticed that he said funding and financing, so I wrote that down
Yeah,
when Matt was talking to him.
I mean, if you gave a developer a gap loan and you gave them a 3-year non-payment and then put a full repayment over the course of 5 or 6 years, you've got that money back, you can redeploy it, and you could even collect an interest rate on it.
Thank you, thanks, Justin.
Thanks.
Catherine Bailey, 520 South 9th Street, up here to comment in my capacity, with the Park County Housing Coalition. I had on my list, just sort of seconding what Justin suggested. I think that opportunity to provide gap financing, potentially in the form of a low interest loan or, would be potentially very powerful and a way for the URA to bring back more money into the district for future improvements. And then I also just wanted to share that I'll be, presenting on what the Housing Coalition is working on at 6 meetings coming up in March. And I'd also be happy to come to the URA and talk about housing related issues that are specific to what you're up to, talk about some of the work that we have planned for 2024, how we're thinking about what we know about what our community members are earning and what they can afford. And what that looks like in terms of our workforce. So, our top 5 employment sectors, what we know people are earning on average in each of the sectors, what it means for what they can afford. I'd be happy to come and talk about that or anything else that might be of interest to the URA board specifically. So just let me know and be happy to do that.
And you think by next month's meeting, March, end of March?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
I certainly could,
Okay.
or whatever schedule works for you all.
Okay,
I mean, I know you have a lot of stuff going on with the downtown improvement plan, so if you have a discussion about housing, maybe it would be appropriate for me to be available to talk a little bit about sort of what affordability needs are for people working in different sectors in the county, that kind of thing. So I'm happy to be part of other programming that's related, or I can come on my own when you guys are having a slow meeting. So just let me
Okay.
know if that makes sense for you.
excellent. That's great to know. Yes, I think that it gets lost that a lot of the URA, not a lot, but definitely a large portion of the URA. I don't know what the difference between a lot and a large portion are. It's getting late. There is a not insignificant portion of the URA that is residential and is in the house, in the streets with just housing. It's not all second floors. And so there are some of that people that have expressed interest and have met already with the city manager and city planner are in more of those residential areas exploring ADUs and other things that I know that you have presented on in the past. So I think that it's helpful for us to know, yeah, as much as possible, I guess, about this as it develops, and keep in mind that some of the projects we may be funding are in residential areas that are technically part of our area and part of downtown, but in the central business district. So they have like different parking needs, which is sometimes helpful for their redevelopment. So that's my just comment on the variety of housing opportunities we have within the URA district.
Great, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know workforce housing has been coming up as part of the conversation. And when I think about workforce housing, it's really helpful for me to differentiate that by what sectors are people working in? What do we know about the average earnings of people in those sectors? So we're being really specific about what everybody's needs are rather than making generalizations about affordable housing, which could be, it could be one thing to somebody and something really different to somebody else.
Totally.
So I think just having that understanding can be really helpful when we're having those conversations. And yeah, I'm happy to share what I know and learn from you all and whomever else participates. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. With no other public in the room, do we have any public comment online? Okay, lost a few. Any board comments?
I was gonna ask you how the downtown master plan meeting went today. Is there anything that you want to share back out to us?
From today's
From your, focus group?
focus group? Sure, so we had a focus group, they had several focus groups today from downtown master plan. I attended one that was arts and culture. And the main thing I guess got out of it was that they have taken the maps and the studies they've been doing and they've updated it with the community feedback from the in-person workshops that happened last year and then online survey feedback. And so they actually started to identify certain areas that could be, for example, a trail or redeveloped or a park. And it was cool to see that, but then our group kind of got into like what specifically they would want to see in those areas. So it was, I feel like they're just still in a good way, like throwing things out there for public feedback. They said they're about 50 to 60% done with in the process. So there's still like plenty of time for people to contribute feedback and yeah, and share. I did hear again that we, you know, one person in particular was not an advocate for housing downtown, similar to the comments we heard tonight. And so, you know, just continuing to listen and try and think about what the URA as the downtown master plan advances, where the URA might be helpful in our funding. And so that's kind of what we talked about today too. We didn't really get specifically into the URA in this meeting. It was more, for example, like if there were an art walk, what types of sculptures would you want? That's sort of where my group was. Because it was arts and culture, that's what they were talking about. But then even suggesting like they had a potential, but like, what about this? What if it's by the river and it's evolving all the time? Or should they be static? Like it got pretty granular on the art walk and, yeah, how about you?
So I was in the tourism and economic development focus group. And I mean, there were a lot of rabbit holes in mine as well, but I think one of the interesting conversations was about recommendations for height restrictions for buildings.
Okay.
A pretty hot topic. Obviously keeping in mind that we don't want to obstruct the views of Livingston Peak, et cetera, but we want to create more opportunities for housing downtown. So that was probably the biggest discussion we had. Aside from there were business owners and Chris Green was there, and there was a lot of discussion about whether or not it's beneficial to have like separate greenways for kind of festival events and whether or not it's actually helpful for downtown businesses when the streets are closed and things like that. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess we talked about that too, like moving it further towards the river.
Yeah.
And the high school.
Yeah.
They did show some mock-ups of what it would look like to have a 5, 6, and 7-story building down further on Main Street. And how like from Park, you couldn't really see them as much as you might think. But then one of Bob Evinger, who we all know very well, he suggested though, like, but if you allow it within certain areas and you, for example, industrial towel, and you go from having like a 2-story residential complex to a 6-story building and then back down to 1-story houses, 1 2-story houses, like it just looks odd and isn't great for aesthetics, I guess. So that was definitely talked about. Yeah, I think as many people as possible that can contribute their feedback on the online surveys, any more in-person stuff that ends up happening, I think is really helpful because I can see how they're with the numbers next to them, like translating it into 68 people said they wanted to see this and 33 people said that, and really trying to see what's most of interest. And so from our perspective as a board, wanting to understand what the public needs and wants, in addition to what's necessary with safety and blight, I want as many people as possible to contribute to their feedback. So, yes. Any other board comments? Thank you.
Not at this time.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Moved, seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. That was my direct phrase.